Welcome into the Grace Point Daily Podcast. My name is Jeremiah Johnson. This is going to be a verse-by-verse edition with none other than Dr. R.B. Maynard. Thank you for all of you that listen to the Grace Point Daily Podcast. We've been trying to get it beefed back up for you guys. We have some, we kind of for about a month or so, too, we only had verse-by-verse with Dr. R.B. Maynard, and we kind of stepped away from some of the real-life stories, things that we had going on. But now we have some. We had a real-life story with Raymond Wilson. Check that one out. We had a Wake Up Grace Point with Greg and Kelly. I have one scheduled in just a couple hours with a missionary from England. And so we're beefing back up the podcast game, getting back into it, Dr. R.B. Maynard. So,
yes.
But you are a staple.
Yes. Wow.
I keep saying this. I'm going to log. I am going to go through all of our episodes and see how many hours you've logged so far.
I bet.
And
I've got the most.
How much time we've spent together.
Yeah, I know.
So one day, if I stay here for 20 years, you'll be able to say, I've spent so many hours with Pastor Jerry. Probably spend more time with me than your kids.
Yeah, definitely my kids.
Your wife. No, probably not your wife, but it'll be a lot. I'll be up there.
Oh yeah. So, I would say I'd be the number one guy. Now I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'd be number one. So
that epic death of yours we keep talking about.
Right.
I'll be a strong memory.
Right. Well, I'm glad we had that discussion with the funeral director the other day too. So he's already in tune,
privy to some of our game plans and stuff like that. Yeah. So
you're going to be really disappointed if I don't leave you my life insurance.
He didn't leave me. Oh man, now I'm going to be driven crazy by that reality.
You better be good to me,
Dr. R.B. So anyway, Dr. R.B. Maynard,
yes.
What's going on in your life, real quick?
Well, I've been a little time off here between houses and those kind of things, so I've just been trying to pick up some odds and ends on my rentals and things like that. So not much. Really.
He is a doctor in terms of theology and genius, but also you're a real estate mogul.
Oh yeah,
kind of similar to our president, Donald Trump.
Right. They're going to have me, I think, on Shark Tank or something like that. Try to give advice. Yeah.
All right, we're in the Word, 1 Corinthians chapter 15. On verse by verse, we go through the Bible. That's what we do, so we love that you guys would dive in with us. Just open up the Word, and we try and go through it in-depthly, verse by verse. Right. Let's do it, Doctor.
Right. Okay, well, I'm really, what is the old saying? I'm not a doctor, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express.
Yeah.
That's
it's 2020. You can basically say or do whatever you want to do, and if you're a doctor, in your mind, who am I to say that you're not?
That's right. I'm a legend in my own mind.
Right.
So, we missed last week. You were on a mission trip, and I know you said you were kind of disappointed that I didn't get up and do Good Morning Grace Point.
Yes.
But I don't know how to run all this equipment, so.
Oh, man. And I learned that I don't want to move to Kansas. I did learn that.
You learned more.
No offense, Kansas. I'm very happy in Southwest Missouri, on the edge of Northwest Arkansas. It's pretty much a dream. So what do I have to complain about?
What could you ask for besides Carthage, Missouri?
Branson's next to me, Northwest Arkansas. Mm-hmm. It's a good life.
And Rick Maynard.
I'm pastor of Prosperity Church. I'm Dr. R.B. Maynard. So anyway, praise the Lord.
Okay, we better move on. Chapter 15, verse 14. Although he did not remove the high places, Asa's heart was fully committed to the Lord all his life. And these are the altars. It's really talking more about personal altars. So in the time prior to the temple, people had altars in their house, or they had altars on some of the high places. So not every altar on the high places was an evil thing. You talk about, sometimes people think of altars on the high place because it's usually talking about tearing down altars as if they were all evil, and there were plenty of that, but there were some altars before they had the temple where there was the place to bring your sacrifices. You had individual altars or whatever, but those should have been taken away with the temple. They shouldn't be still standing. And so and let me read 2 Chronicles 14:3. This is kind of the what you would compare 1 Kings as some of the same material. It says, he removed the foreign altars and the high places, smashed the sacred stones, and cut down the Asherah poles. And this has probably had to do with some of that private worship that they had going on, not necessarily all public worship of either the true God or the idols. They had, obviously, for for every good thing, there's a negative, and that's the devil likes to do that. He takes those things that God intended for good, and then he
distorts,
mimics,
twists.
So that's kind of what goes on with part of it. And this is what what would the people think about his idea? Why didn't he completely tear things down? Why didn't he? And there's just a few explanations. It says maybe Asa thought it was still lawful to have those. So in other words, he hadn't taken down the altars that he should have taken down. And the other thing, they're private altars, and people could think that Asa's lack of taking care of that would be his approval of it. And that's what happens a lot of times with the church. Even if you don't preach against something, then even though you haven't said anything about it, if you don't preach against it, then people tend to think it must be okay because you've never said anything. Whether it be if it was alcohol and you never said anything about alcohol or drunkenness or anything like that, then people who would lean towards those things would think it might be okay. Mm-hmm. So maybe people may have thought, and it goes back to having your idol worship at home. And I know we've gone through a virus that has kept us out of church, and we're finally coming back. And now the virus is, we're going through all this, all these things. But people tend to think, well, this isn't so bad. I could just have my church at home. Grace Point is live, so I can just watch it at home, and I don't need to come.
You can give online at gracepointag.org. Your tithes and offerings, give to missionaries.
That was one. You should have said that really quiet, like a subliminal message.
Yeah.
But people
you can send it by mail to 1605 South Baker Boulevard, Carthage, Missouri 64836, or stop by the office Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
This commercial break has been brought to you by
right.
But and the other question that's asked, and I've told this many times, but the other question that's asked is, people look at things and think, what's wrong with this? Why can't we do this? And then the question is, why did things used to be wrong and now they're not wrong? Mm-hmm. And yes, we see it in censorship with television. And I've told the story many times about the old show Leave It to Beaver, if you've ever watched that show. But anyway, they talked to them years later about censorship, and they said that he had a turtle one time, and so he was hiding it from his mom and dad. He wasn't supposed to have it. And so he was going to put it in the toilet so it'd have water. And the censors said they couldn't show the toilet bowl. So they had to take that out of the show. Now, have we come a long ways since not being able to show a turtle in a toilet bowl with censorship? And my mom used to make that statement, there's just nothing wrong anymore. And, and that to some extent that's true, but I've talked about the membership card. It always mentioned the old membership cards. It's not the one we have today, but it said no alcohol, no tobacco, no dancing, no gambling, no going to movies or other questionable places of entertainment, was the way it was worded. So when you signed that, you were not supposed to do any of those things. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying they're okay now, but we used to live under more legalistic than what we do now, where things were just, there was a list. If you need to know what to do, just go to the church, look at the membership card, and they could tell you what you could and could not do. And
I'm just going to go to the buffet at the casino. That's it. I promise.
Right. I'm not supporting them. So, but and then it goes on. Those were the things that are on the membership cards. But I think of other things. I'm older than you. I've been raised in the church. I've seen the time when a woman could not wear pants to church, and especially jeans. I mean, that would just be sacrilege.
Provocative.
Yeah. I mean, well,
over the top.
I never did understand that because it was, the jeans covered up more than some of the dresses that the women wore. Yeah. But yet that was, and again, we could get into all that. But
and it was interesting for me. I mean, my journey is getting saved in 1997, then going to North Central University. It was very interesting for me because when my wife went just a couple years earlier, well, 1 year earlier, they had dress code. They had
Right.
like dresses, and it had to be certain length, and guys had to wear slacks and shirt. And then they let it all go. So when I got there, it was like,
Right.
I always make fun of, the chicks wearing pajamas at 7 a.m. Class is like, like, hey, brush your hair, brush your teeth, put on some, and tattoos were illegal, and then
Right.
available. And so there was still definitely rules and restrictions, but man, my Bible college kind of like the pendulum swung
Right.
the other direction. And, and that's what I've kind of seen in my time in Christianity is probably some of the, maybe some of the exterior things in terms of, like when I got saved is like, if you would preach on Sunday morning, man, you had to have a suit and tie on.
Oh yeah.
And now it's, jeans and a dress shirt,
Right.
dress shoes or something,
Right.
You want to look good, respectable. Now some pastors are trying to look as cool can be,
Right.
Trendy and all those kind of things. Music definitely started to transition.
Right.
I think pretty big from contemporary to almost rock.
Yes.
I got saved when it was Darling Check, and it was still very piano driven. To I remember Sonic Flood, drums, electric guitars,
Right.
guitar now being the leader,
Right.
as opposed to the piano. So those are
Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of
transitions I made.
jewelry and makeup, and there's just all kinds of. And I'm not saying that we need to go back to a list of rules and regulations, but on the other hand, do I worry a little? I do, in the sense that how far does it? In other words, are there going to be any guidelines at all? For church or for whatever. So I think we just have to be careful that those list of things. If somebody could have explained to me biblically what the problem was with some of the, I might have understood, but it was just a list. And so I think today, whatever we find that may be wrong in the church, biblically or morally or even just being courteous, I guess, some things that would be acceptable or whatever. But anyway, we better move on. But and it talks about Asa being fully committed, and many of these guys, and you see this as you go through the Kings, almost every one of them, it'll say he was fully committed to the Lord, except or but this one thing. And it goes on, verse 15, it says, he brought into the temple of the Lord the silver and gold and the articles that he and his father had dedicated. So Abijam had removed the treasures from the temple, and Asa finds them, brings them back to their right place. And if you go to Chronicles, and we don't always go there and read all those scriptures, but there's always more to the story. Or if you want to read and really get into this study, you can look at both sides of it and see, gather up as much information as there is. But in 2 Chronicles 16, this is 12 through 14, and this is talking about Asa and kind of what happened to him, or additional information. It says, Asa became sick in the 39th year of his reign. His sickness was from his feet up, but in his sickness too he sought not God, but the doctors. Asa lay down with his fathers and died in the 41st year of his reign. They buried him in the grave that they had cut out for himself in the city of David, and lay him down on a bed that was filled with a variety of spices expertly prepared. Then they burnt a very great funeral fire for him. So, under the basic statutes or the norm of what somebody, he was a great man. He was a good king. He was a righteous man of the Torah. If you read, some of the history stuff about him, it talks about all these good things. And it's a little bit like David. We've talked about David, where it just keeps saying, as your father David, as David did, like he was this great man, and he was a great man. But it always says, except for the event with Uriah. And then these other guys, it says he was a great man, he was a great king, he was a great man of the word, except for, this one thing in his life. And we've talked about this in here before, but, regrets. And, I know there's a little controversy. Some people say I don't have any regrets because the things in my life have brought me to where I am today. Well, I do have regrets. I wish if someone were writing this story about me. They might say, oh, Rick has been faithful to the church, and they might have those good things. And then they would say, but do you remember when, and I won't I'm not going to broadcast those things today.
Yeah.
But man, I have some things in my life. It's like, I wish my slate was clean there. I wish I hadn't done that, And people say, well, yeah, but it brought you. That's true, it did. But you know what? God could have brought me where I am today by another means than my sin.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, the old line used to be, I'm building my testimony. I'm going to do all these wrong things, and then I'll have something to tell what God delivered me
My wife's
from.
talked about that before, that we almost kind of in the church, there's been periods where we glorify that. Like, if you having like a bad past is cool.
Right.
I got a cool testimony.
Well, it's like people want to think, well, you don't know what I'm going through because you haven't been. And that is true. But but I do know some things because of some things I've gone through.
Yeah.
And so for all those things that had those but moments or those except moments, and that one flaw, and unfortunately, and I'm guilty, but we are judgmental people who will say, that was a great service, but it was a little long. He's a great preacher, but this flaw that's there, and we have to find somehow that flaw stands out instead of all that 99% that was good. And and you say, well, God did that because he talks about these guys. Well, he did that to say, I can use imperfect people, and that these imperfect people can come around and do the right thing. That's what David did, except that one thing in his life, but yet he came back. That was David's. And so, and part of this here with him, and this is a good lesson. This one verse would make a sermon if you read this, but it said, he worried about his own needs, so he began to call the doctors. And basically, we don't preach here that you don't use the doctor, that God takes care of everything. I believe God can take care of everything, but I believe that we go to let me back up. We go to the church first. We go to God first, and that's very biblical. If anyone's sick, let him call the doctor. No, let him call for the elders of the church. Pray for me, and then if God's got some plan to use medical or whatever, I don't know where that line is that you cross the line, but in Asa's case, it just says he didn't consult God at all, and there's a fine line someplace there between when do you go to the doctor, when do you trust God for healing. Is going to the doctor lack of faith because, I prayed about it. Well, God's not going to do it, so I'll just go to the doctor and get him to do it.
Right.
In other words. And so, but it was probably a sore spot with God there because, maybe sometimes God's sitting up there like, hey, I'm right here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Why? I mean, I don't know how it all works, but is God sitting up there watching us like, he is, but is he watching us like, where are you going? Why didn't you ask me? I would have done this for you had you asked. You have not because you asked not. And so that was Asa's problem. He got sick, and he was sick for 2 years. But it says he didn't call on God because of his sickness. And so that was one of his but moments that he didn't rely on God to take care of this. Some people say that it was like a gout when it talks about coming from the feet. I've never had that. I've known some people have that talk about it being very painful. And so he was probably, and I know sometimes you might go to the doctor because, hey, you need a tetanus shot. Well, can God keep you from tetanus? Yeah, he could, but, I think there's wisdom. But then when you go for 2 years, he went 2 years with an illness and didn't call on God.
Wow.
I mean, that's, so.
I stepped on a couple nails last week that, not full in, but they did puncture the skin, so. Yeah. I'm doing okay right now.
I thought you were acting a little strange this morning, but that's a story for another time. But it was a result of his failure, and he had an opportunity, or maybe God would have healed that or at least said you didn't even bother to ask for help in that. So, and then one of the other things about Asa here is it talks about his funeral a little bit, and for most people in the Bible, or for a lot of people in the Bible, they don't get any talk. Moses, it just says he died and was buried, after all the great things that Moses did. So not everyone got this public funeral. A lot of people argue against funerals, even from a religious standpoint. They say, that's not appropriate to, where did we get this standard of opening a casket and people walking by and looking at, the body in the casket? And I mean, it all seems a little strange. I'm not sure what the background is on where that came from. But with Asa, it says they buried him in his grave that he had cut out for himself in the city of David. So in other words, he had a pre-arrangement for his death. Lay him down on a bed that was filled with a variety of spices, which again would be a honorable way of being buried. And that says, then they burnt a very great funeral fire for him. So it was probably a thing that was attended by a lot of people that were able to view that. It was an honorable thing. And the funeral fire was not, and again, I know there's some debate about cremation. Okay. People think, Christians should not be cremated. I mean, how's God going to resurrect the body, if you're cremated? Well,
yeah, he's going to pick up all those ashes from all over where they've blown, and
I don't know how that's going to work either, but there are people who die, people who died in the World Trade Center there was not a body.
Explosion, fire.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things. So we won't get into, again, the debate on whether to cremate or not to cremate today, but I mentioned the other night, Wednesday night, I love the little cartoon that the guy's talking to the guy's wife after they put him in the crematory or whatever you call it. But anyway, he said, we really appreciate your business, but, it wasn't very funny that you loaded his pants with fireworks before we,
right.
Before we
put
him in the
I mean,
oven.
There is the option now. I haven't brought this up regarding you, Dr. R.B. Maynard. There is cryo-freezing. Have you heard of this before? When people die, you just cryo-freeze the body. That way, when we get the technology and the tech is there via Elon Musk, Tesla, or something, we just bring you back to life.
Yeah, that'd be scary.
Option number 3.
That's scary. Yeah, who knows what people are going to be trying if the Lord doesn't come back? Who knows what's out there? But anyway, verse 15 or 15, 25, and 26. Nadab, son of Jeroboam, became king of Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, walking in the ways of his father and in his son, which he had caused Israel to commit. And I thought this is kind of where we were in Sunday school the other day, and it was a very appropriate message for Father's Day. This would be I don't know that I've ever heard a Father's Day sermon preached out of this verse, but talking about he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, walking in the ways of his father and in his sin, which he had caused Israel to commit. And I thought, what a sad reflection. And, Stella and I were having a conversation this morning about families and raising kids and how there's so many families out there that are raising their kids in such a terrible environment, but then we expect those kids to have a different result.
Yeah,
and
right.
And I even think it even came to my mind about all the rioting, everything that's going on, the vandalism, the murder, the whatever it is right now. You'd like to sit down and say, what was your family life?
Yeah, your parents and
I mean, did you
home life?
If you're breaking the glass out of buildings and looting and doing that, did you live in a lifestyle where your parents were criminals and where they taught you how to steal and how to get something for nothing, or that you're an oppressed person that deserves to have free things? And what kind of and I know it does not always work, because I could name families who raised children, and one of them is the most godly and the other one's just a devil. I mean, raised in the same home. So it doesn't always work.
Yeah.
but at least if you raise them right, then it's not coming back. I mean, wouldn't you hate to have something written about you to say your sons turned out to be terrible like their father?
Yeah.
I mean, and especially if what happens when the father maybe decides to change later, and then he has to look back on the way he raised his children, and and it says that many times about these kings. They did evil like their fathers, like their grandfather.
Yeah. And, it's something I was talking with our guest speaker on Sunday regarding, being Father's Day. And he's a retired minister now and pastored a very large church. And but now it's kind of like, man, even just a couple of years later in the realm of ministry, you're forgotten by people. So what really matters? What matters is your children.
Right.
Again, that's what, at the end of the day, that's what matters for me. I mean, I'm 40 and haven't reached the epitome of wisdom, but knowing that, like, my kids matter. Serving the Lord, that's what matters, not my ministry success. I mean, I care about that. I strive for it. I work hard in that regards. But man, even someone like Pastor Jim, who was here, very large church, lots of influence, moves to a different part of the country where it's like now, they don't really ask him to do much. He's even gone back to the church he did pastor. Well, people change, things change. You're not, I mean, you could be the most famous of all people and not be remembered. So what are you chasing and what are you investing in?
Right.
And at the end of the day, what matters is your children, your grandchildren, investing godliness and spirituality into those, because this other stuff is so fleeting, so fleeting, money, stuff, people.
I hate it that I'm away from my kids and grandkids. Not that I want to sit down and preach a sermon to them, but just that I'm not there where I feel like I can have that influence on them. And so far they're all good. I mean, my sons. I said one of the biggest lies that I think Satan can give to the church is, if you force your kids to go to church, when they get older, they won't want to go. Well, that is not true. My kids, I told them, I don't care when you get to be 20 years old, if you're living at home and you go out and get drunk or something, if it's Sunday morning, we're going to church. I'm going to drag you out of bed and we're going to go to church. And that didn't turn them off to church. They both still go to church. They've both taken their kids to church. They take their grandkids to church. I mean, it's a big part of their life.
Yeah.
And so don't use that statement. And again, if your kids are extremely unhappy, then find a way to not just cater, but, don't make your kids be miserable in church either. And, and I'm a big, me, I'm a big guy on staying in the church. Don't leave the church. Don't change. But, there's times when maybe for your children, I went through a time when my boys were just not happy with the youth ministry of the church. And they wanted to go to Fairview Christian. And they knew the youth pastor and all their friends were going there. And it was like, you know what? I let them go for a while because it was better to see them happy and want to go to church than to be mad at the church and unhappy in the church and have that as their memory of church. And maybe then they would become those kids that said, I'm not going to church anymore because of that bad experience. So,
I mean, you lost your deaconship over it, but you got it back. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. just for a short time, but but he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He took after his father, which is again, that could be a great thing or a terrible thing. And then he's talking about the leader as a leader. It says, the sin which he had caused Israel to commit. And this is, to me, it's bad enough that you have not raised your children right. In other words, his children are going to follow in these bad footsteps. You caused, it's your fault, in other words. Now it's one thing to say, man, I wish my kids would have served the Lord, but to have God say, well, it's your fault they didn't. I mean, that is a low blow, if you would, to say it's my fault that my kids are not serving the Lord today. But not only that is as a pastor of being able to say, I mean, how would you like for it to be written about you? You were not a good example to your children. Your children turned out to be sinners because of you, and you caused your congregation to sin.
Yeah.
Now, you can say, oh, well, that's not the way it works. Everybody's responsible for themselves. The pastor's not. But you know as well as I do that a pastor can manipulate, can put things in there that are twist the scripture, and people look up to leadership.
Yes.
They look up to the pastor. There are people, and it's sad because people should be reading the Word and praying and all. I mean, yes, we have a personal responsibility, but there are people in the church, and you have to realize as a pastor, as a Sunday school teacher, whatever, in a leadership, you have to realize that you are responsible for people, and you can lead them down the wrong path. So, and I would hate for that to be written about me. You caused your children to sin, and you caused the church to sin because you got up and said, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with this. I don't think God would be upset about that. I don't really think that's a sin. We live in 2020. We don't live back then when and I'm not even going to get into start naming sins today, but to lead a congregation astray where when you're gone and the new pastor comes in and he's trying to preach against something, and you're like, well, our old pastor didn't think that was wrong. Yeah. And that's why I tell people all the time when I teach, preach, whatever you want to call it, I said, check me out, get the word. If I'm saying something and you're like, I don't think that's quite, hey, find it, bring it to me and say, hey, that's not what this says. That's not God.
Yeah. I had a pastor, a friend, and we're, because of distance and time, et cetera, not as close together, but he ended up pastoring a church, took over a church, and where when they're having their leadership, like team gatherings, they're all drinking.
Right.
But that was acceptable prior leadership. Right. So, I mean, again, is, one drink or clearly we know the Bible says do not get drunk on wine, but rather be filled with the Spirit. We are very firm in that, et cetera. So, but, he had to figure out how to be I'm not really, kind of not what I'm going for here under my leadership, guys.
Well, I've talked about it before and we'll finish up here, but, when the pastor came here from Indiana, I was 10 years old.
Was it South Bend? I mean, that's if you come from that area.
Where was he from? I don't remember where they were from. Honestly, I think they might have been. Anyway, we won't.
Shout out to Pastor Greg there.
Yeah. But they moved here from Indiana, and they came before Brother Henson. So Brother Reed had been here, who was pretty strict. I mean, pretty old school, no makeup, no, that kind of pastor. And of course I was 10. I mean, I faintly remember him, and then I remember the Smiths coming, but they came from Indiana, and Indiana's, and still to this day, is more liberal than they are here in the church. I'm not saying they're horrible. I'm just saying more liberal.
Yeah.
And when they came here, man, the girls, short skirts. They, back then it was like no mixed bathing, no boys and girls in the same pool, and they did that kind of stuff. And it was kind of a shock to the system, and that was from,
whoa.
Well, then we went back kind of the other direction because Brother Henson, when he first started, was very, not holiness, but pretty strict in his beliefs. He mellowed a lot during the years and was not so much that way. But anyway, and now, if you go to a wedding, both of my boys, their weddings, there was alcohol there, and I'm not even going to say it was them or their in-laws or whatever, but just a culture there that was not. Now they didn't have alcohol in the church building, so they went someplace else for a reception, but there was some alcohol there, and so just differences in culture even. And I'm not saying you're causing people to sin but whatever the issue is, whether it's alcohol, whatever it is, a pastor can manipulate, can say things where you're like, well, the pastor said it was okay, and I trust what he says. Well, you trust what he says because he said what you wanted to do.
Yes.
Anyway, so we better wind it up there
Get
today.
that bun in your hair, ladies.
Yes,
Stella Maynard. I have not seen her one Sunday with a bun in her hair.
I know. This Sunday
Very
is the
offensive.
Sunday. I know. I've been trying, but I haven't been able to get it there. So
Verse by verse with Dr. R.B. Maynard. Please like, share, subscribe. Listen to the Grace Point Daily podcast. Got some good ones coming up, but the one consistent, one faithful thing that we do over and over again, verse by verse, Dr. R.B. Maynard. You can now see him live on Sunday mornings. How'd that go? You were live your first Sunday school.
I had more people than I thought. I was afraid people would be afraid with social distancing and all that stuff, but we had, I think we had 17 or something like that. So I was, and we've been 25 to 30. So it was pretty good.
Verse by verse, you can watch it Facebook Live, listen to the podcast, go to the Grace Point Daily YouTube channel, whatever you want to do. We thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys next time. Appreciate it.